Hi guys, it's me, ChazRHD, and welcome tonight to the full 2022 Formula 1 season review. Great to see all of you guys here after, of course, the final Grand Prix yesterday. And yeah, we've got plenty to go through in this stream. We're not going to go through, absolutely everything in 2022 because, we're not going to be that minute in our, detail in this stream. But we will be getting into, really, all of the big topics regarding the teams, drivers, and I'll be obviously giving my thoughts during the stream as to how certain drivers and certain teams performed this season compared to how, the expectations were coming into the season and how good I think certain teams or drivers can be, or, how good their potential is. So, yeah, we'll be getting into that as well. I'll be comparing all of the teammates for all the teams during the stream as well. So you guys can see the key stats behind the teammate battles at all of the Formula 1 teams. And later in the stream, I will be getting into my ranking of all 20 drivers in 2022. And obviously go from 1st to 20th and ranking them in the order that, I think was best to worst. And yeah, hopefully you guys can let me know in the chat who you think was, the best drivers, best few drivers in F1 this season, and some of the worst few. That would be great. And also, we will get into some other discussions as well, such as what do you guys think the best race of the season was? Who do you, what do you call it? What was the worst races of the season? Overtake of the season? We'll get into that stuff as well. But, and I will set up polls in the chat during tonight's stream. Probably not straight away, but yeah, when we get into the, driver rankings and stuff like that, and, determining what the best race is this season, or the best race this season has been, the worst race and other things, then I will do some polls in the chat to see what you guys have to say. But yeah, what we're going to start off with is just going team by team and discussing how the drivers did, how the team did in 2022, and how their season went from obviously start to finish. And as we go through each team, I will get into the stats comparing the teammates, so you guys know all of the key stats regarding those battles in 2022. But before I go into all of that, let's get into the full championship standings for 2022. And we'll start off, of course, on the driver's side. So Max Verstappen, world champion for the second time in Formula 1. Charles Leclerc ends up finishing just about in second place, 3 points clear of Sergio Perez. George Russell ends up in fourth, quite comfortably in fourth as well. Carlos Sainz jumps up to P5, just ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who of course had a DNF yesterday in the Grand Prix. And really, that DNF cost Hamilton fifth in the championship. Lando Norris finishes in seventh on, well, I thought it was 121 points, but then right before the stream, I remembered it's actually 122 points because he got the fastest lap of the race yesterday. So apologies about that slight error. And then as for the rest of the top 10, you have Esteban Ocon in 8th, Fernando Alonso in 9th, and Valtteri Bottas in 10th. So that's your top 10 of the Drivers' Championship. As for the rest of the order, that normally, of course, I don't show, you have Daniel Ricciardo in 11th, level on points with Sebastian Vettel. The only reason Ricciardo finishes ahead of Vettel is because Ricciardo has a best result of the season in terms of, placement than Vettel does. Ricciardo's best result was 5th in Singapore. Vettel's was 6th in Baku and Japan. So that's why Ricciardo finishes in 11th, with Vettel in 12th, Magnussen 13th, Gasly 14th, Stroll 15th, Schumacher 16th, Tsunoda 17th again. Schumacher better or his best race result better than Tsunoda's best. I think Tsunoda's best was 7th at Imola at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, and I think Schumacher, his was 6th in Austria. Then Zhou 18th, Albon 19th, Latifi in 20th, and I couldn't be bothered to put the last two drivers in the championship on the screen, but Nick De Vries 21st on 2 points, I think it is, and Nico Hulkenberg last in the championship, 22nd. Of course, he did the first two races of the season for Aston Martin on 0 points. So that is the drivers' standings for 2022. Now on to the constructors' standings. So Red Bull, Constructors World Champions for the first time since 2013, 9 years ago. And of course, they have clearly dominated 2022. And they've ended up 205 points clear of Ferrari in the championship. That is monumental. I'll be honest, coming into this season, I thought Red Bull had a pretty decent chance at winning the championship. Both drivers and constructors, but I did not think on the constructor side even that the gap would get anywhere near even 150 points, never mind over 200 points in Red Bull's favour. Just mental how many points Red Bull have outscored, Ferrari by, and have just scored in general. Ferrari, second, and they end up finishing 39 points clear of Mercedes in third. If Mercedes had produced a car that was just, 2 or 3 tenths of a second quicker per lap, they probably would have ended up second in the championship this year. But yeah, they were never going to be title contenders with the car they produced. Alpine finishing 4th, their highest placed finish in the championship since 2018, when they were by name the Renault Works team, even though, of course, they are still the Renault Works team in reality. McLaren finishing 5th, 14 points behind. That's McLaren's, that's the first time McLaren have finished outside the top 4 in the championship since 2018, where they finished in 6th or 7th. I can't remember exactly where they finished that year, but they have not had the best season, McLaren, as we'll get into later. Alfa Romeo finishing 6th, level on points with Aston Martin, who finished in 7th. Alfa Romeo, the reason they finish ahead is because their best race result of the season was 5th at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, and Aston Martin's best was 6th, and I think 3 out of 4 occasions they had that this season. But Alfa Romeo just snatching it, and vital that they did hold on to that position, because it does mean a lot to them financially. Haas finishing 8th, 2 points clear of AlphaTauri in 9th. They've had a very disappointing 2022 season, and Williams finish in last. 4 out of the last 5 years, I think, Williams have now finished last in the championship. So yeah, they are still pretty much the basement dwellers in Formula 1 since 2018. So let's now, as we've gone through the official championship standings, let's now go through the teams. Just want to say again, this stream, I'm not going to, or I'm at least going to try not go super long with this stream, because one, I'm pretty tired and I've got to be up early tomorrow for uni. Got to be up at 7 a.m. So I don't really want to be, going massively long with this, because it does take me a bit of time to wind down after a stream or, anything like this, in an evening. But also, we've got World Cup matches happening, obviously, today, and the World Cup has started. And there's a match on in 45 minutes, USA versus Wales, and I don't want to be clashing with that for the entire of that game. So, yeah, I'm going to try and be on for, say, another hour and a half at most from now. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, but I'm going to now go through the teams, and we'll start, of course, with the world champions, Red Bull Racing. What a season they've had. I thought coming into this season they would be world champions. I've got to be honest, because I've always had my doubts, as you guys know, about Ferrari and their ability to properly fight for a championship and to be able to deliver consistent good results, to be able to deliver on the promise of possible world championship. So I always thought Red Bull were, the favourites this season. I knew they were going to get better with their car, which they did, but I did not expect it to be anywhere near as dominant as it turned out to be, with them winning 17 races out of the 22 races we had this season. That is unbelievably good. That's the most wins Red Bull have had in a Formula One season, I'm pretty sure. So, yeah, incredible record from Red Bull Racing. And, when you look at the season, at the end of the day, they, the second half of the season especially, they were just too quick, but also they were the best performing team when it came to strategy calls, they had the best pit crew, the best race pace, really, for most of the season. And they developed their car, well, maybe not the best, but definitely one of the best teams at developing their car this year. Because at the start of the season, Red Bull were not massively quick. We have to remember in Bahrain, a track that, if they were to race that now, I think Red Bull would win that Grand Prix by quite a margin over Ferrari because of the characteristics of that circuit. But if we go back to Bahrain, they were second and fourth in qualifying, and of course had a double DNF in the Grand Prix as well. So didn't start off the season well, obviously with their reliability issues relating to the fuel system, which also hurt Max Verstappen at the Australian Grand Prix, where he had a DNF there. But Red Bull at the start of the season, no doubt, was slower than Ferrari, even though they won in Saudi Arabia. That really took a, brilliant second half of the race and drive from Max Verstappen to deliver on or to get that race victory that day in Jeddah. But once we got to the European season at the start, or the end of April, at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, Red Bull started to shed some weight off their car, and it definitely made the car, say, 2 or 3 tenths of a second quicker. And then, once we got a couple races more down the line, they shed some more weight and started to refine on the design of their car. And it, shaved off probably another tenth or two compared to Ferrari. And really, I would say from say the Spanish or Monaco Grand Prix on, even though not at every racetrack Red Bull, were quicker than Ferrari, Red Bull's car from really, Spanish Grand Prix until the end of the season didn't really change that much. I mean, they still brought upgrades, and no doubt it did make the car quicker, but they didn't really, improve massively after that, because the majority of improvement came with the, them getting rid of the extra unnecessary weight that they had on their car. So that was really the key, development-wise, to why they got so much quicker after the start of the Formula One season. But another key in terms of the pace difference between Red Bull and Ferrari this season is obviously with the FIA technical directive that came in at the Belgian Grand Prix. That clearly hurt Ferrari more than Red Bull, with it, banning the possible or the possibility of flexi floors, which obviously I've talked about before. Clearly hurt Ferrari more than Red Bull, and Ferrari did bring an upgrade before the summer break, a floor upgrade that accelerated quite a bit their tyre wear issues. And that's why in the second half of the season, Red Bull won so many races and ended up winning, I think at one point, 9 races in a row. from the French Grand Prix to the Mexico City Grand Prix. 9 wins in a row. That is mental to have that many wins in a row. It's, very rarely been done in F1, and only the absolute elite teams, drivers, whatever you want to call it, have been able to do that in Formula One history. So yeah, those were the keys, I think, behind Red Bull, ending the season as the quicker team compared to Ferrari. But also, we have to remember that Ferrari, in plenty of Grand Prix this season, were leading or in a great position to be able to win certain races that Red Bull ended up winning, and ended up throwing it away with either engine problems or really bad strategy calls. And also, they had really bad, as I said, race pace and tyre wear in the second half of the season, which was, not really a thing they had at the very start of 2022. So, yeah, those are also very important, of course, behind Red Bull getting as many wins as they did. And when it came to the drivers this season, with Max Verstappen, I'll probably get onto this a bit more later when I do my rankings, 1st to 20th of who my best and worst drivers are of the season. But with Verstappen, I don't think this season he's driven, better than other seasons. For example, 2021, 2020. Maybe you could even argue 2019. And the reason I say that is because a lot of the time, of course, Max has been very quick this season. He's been great. But a lot of the time, all he's had to do is just deliver on the potential of the car. He's not had to produce a 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 performance 95% of the time to get the, 15 wins he's had in 2022. And also, Ferrari and Leclerc making their mistakes this season has helped ease the load on Verstappen. And it's made Verstappen not have to work as hard as, say, he did in 2021. And obviously in previous years where he didn't have a championship contending car. So, yeah, Max has had a great season, no doubt about it. And he's been the best driver this season, but I don't think this has been Max's, best season of his career in terms of his own driving. Statistically, yes, it is Max's best season, but I don't think it is his most impressive season. And I think that's the scariest thing about it, is that I think Max this season could have, at times, definitely driven a lot quicker and been even better than he was. But like I said, a lot of the time he didn't need to. A lot of the time, all he had to do was deliver on the potential of the car or wait for the inevitable to happen, which was Ferrari imploding, which they did so many times this season. So, yeah, great season for Verstappen, but I think definitely, I think if, say, next season it's a lot more competitive, the fight for victories and the championship, I think you'll definitely see Max Verstappen better next season than he was this season. And for Sergio Perez, quickly, yeah, Perez, very good season. I don't rate him as highly for this season as, some other drivers, as I'll get into later, but this has been maybe not his absolute best season. I'd probably say 2020 is his best season in Formula One, but probably this is second best season of his career. Again, a lot of the time he did just deliver on the potential of the car, but there was a lot of races this season where he was really, really good. And there was even a couple races this season where he was truly elite, such as the Monaco Grand Prix, winning that Grand Prix. Of course, Ferrari's strategy call blunder did help him a lot. But in those conditions, when Ferrari were also quicker that weekend, to be able to get into the lead and hold on under so much pressure was so impressive. And then, of course, his win in Singapore was really impressive as well. Obviously leading the entire race and, again, holding on for the win, despite having so much pressure from Charles Leclerc behind. So, yeah, Sergio Perez, has had definitely a very good season. And again, a lot of the other good results he's had, second places, third places, I think really was delivering on the potential of the car. Another thing, though, that was very impressive with Perez this season is he has definitely closed the gap pace-wise to Max Verstappen. On average, I haven't done the actual calculation, but I think I'm pretty sure this season he's been on average closer on lap time to Max Verstappen's. So he's definitely made quite a bit of progress from last year. Last year was a good year for Perez, but he wasn't consistently as good as he's been this year. So, yeah. For Sergio Perez, I think, good season. Could he do any better? Not really. I think really this season, Perez has showed what his ceiling is as, a very good number 2 driver who can get, obviously if the car's very good, a couple wins a season and definitely be a very good supporting driver for Max Verstappen. Even though, Verstappen would have won the championship this season anyway, even if Perez was not his teammate. Yeah, Perez has been a very good teammate for Verstappen. And, it's not been too slow, but has backed him up and, helped, obviously, the team in the Constructors' Championship a lot as well with his very good, consistent results and so many podiums that Perez had this season. But, great season for Red Bull. And coming into this year, I did not think it would be quite this good. I thought they would be, world champions, but maybe by 50, 60 points in the drivers or constructors, and constructors. But, to win the way they have has been super impressive. And not just super impressive because they've turned it into factually such a good season, but you have to remember, this Red Bull car, it's a very good car, but it's not been miles quicker than the Ferrari and Mercedes this season at every race, or almost every race. Like, for example, the Mercedes was a couple years ago, or the Mercedes car in the mid part of the last decade was, or the Williams car in the early 90s was, or, the Ferrari was in the early to mid 2000s. It's not been as dominant of a car on pace as those cars were. So that's what makes it so impressive. 17 wins in a season. So an amazing team, Red Bull, and a great performance this season. And even though next season, with the further reduction of wind tunnel aero testing time, it will be tougher next season to have, 17 wins again, they are going to be really hard to stop in 2023, and it's going to take quite an effort to overcome them in 2023, and they are definitely now set, in my opinion, to really dominate the next few years of Formula 1 with, of course, Max Verstappen. Now, before we go on to Ferrari, let's get into the key stats comparing the two drivers. So in qualifying, Max Verstappen 18-4 over Sergio Perez, and then 17-4 over Perez in the races. The reason one race is excluded from that, because obviously with that races stat, it only counts up to 21 rather than 22, because of course we've had 22 races this season. Obviously Red Bull had a double DNF in Bahrain, so that's why I've not included that. But in qualifying and in the races this season, of course, Max Verstappen has been comfortably better than Perez, and they share 2 DNFs apiece. And an incredible stat. Max has had 15 wins, Perez 2 wins. Just an incredible stat there from Max Verstappen. And what a season. And like I said, the scariest thing about it is I don't think this season was his best season, and I think he could absolutely get better and drive better if needed, or if he needs to push harder or drive better. I think he could absolutely show more than what we've seen this season. So yeah, it is going to be really hard to stop Verstappen in the future. And of course now a 2-time world champion. But now we'll go on to the Ferrari team. Now, I will admit, I'm not going to go too deep into my thoughts at Ferrari because I am doing, or I haven't got it going yet, but I am going to be doing a 2-part, in-depth, properly in-depth season review of the Ferrari team for 2022. So I'm not going to go too deep tonight into my thoughts as to them. But yeah, we'll just go through their season. So start the season with the best car, no doubt about it. And Charles Leclerc was leading the championship by quite a distance after 3 Grand Prix and 2 wins and a second place in the first 3 Grand Prix of the season. Then the momentum really swung back into Red Bull's favour. Charles Leclerc obviously having a silly spin at Imola cost himself a few points. Miami, though, they got back on it, and even though they lost to Red Bull, they were still pretty strong, and they still gave Verstappen, a hard enough weekend. But then, really, the Spanish, Monaco, and Azerbaijan Grand Prix, those were the races that cost Ferrari maintaining a championship challenge this season, because going into the Spanish Grand Prix, Leclerc was leading the championship, I think, by, 20 points or something like that? So it was still decently comfortable for Leclerc. His lead was leading the race by 13 seconds over Verstappen, and then bang, his engine fails. Max Verstappen wins the race, takes the lead of the championship. Leclerc then, after, starting on pole in Monaco with Sainz alongside him on the front row, Ferrari make an awful strategy blunder, and Leclerc ends up dropping from 1st to 4th, gifting another few points to Verstappen. And then in Baku, where Leclerc, again, pole position, it was going to be close between Leclerc and Verstappen, no doubt about it, as to who won that Grand Prix. But then Ferrari, with both cars, had an engine failure, and Red Bull had a 1-2, Max Verstappen winning, and then because Leclerc had to take a penalty in Canada, Verstappen obviously won the race in Canada. Leclerc could only finish in 5th place. So after the Canadian Grand Prix, it was pretty much over. And yeah, it is such a shame because Ferrari looked promising after the first 3 races. They looked like they had a really quick car in not just qualifying, but in race trim as well. Charles Leclerc was driving incredibly well. Carlos Sainz not so much, but Ferrari were looking great, and Red Bull were looking as though they had a lot of work to do. And of course, they did a lot of work to make their car quite a bit quicker. And Ferrari, yet again, have not developed their car well this season. Because really, after the start of the season, compared to Mercedes and Red Bull, Ferrari, as the season has gone on, have just got slower, which is not good enough. You're not going to be able to win championships if you are developing like that. And a flaw that they brought to the French Grand Prix, I think it was, further accelerated by quite a bit their tyre issues in terms of wearing out their tyres too much on a Sunday in a Grand Prix. And that's why they struggled a lot in the second half of the season. And they say Ferrari, they are working on that for 2023. Let's hope they do improve on it massively, because it would help them a lot in 2023. But yeah, those were obviously big issues for Ferrari, which compounded their championship challenge. And then the, the technical directive that came into effect at the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, just made their car a lot slower. And they were maybe not running completely a flexible floor, but they were definitely doing something in that direction, Ferrari, that that made their car as quick as it was before the summer break, and clearly did not benefit from that technical directive. They still, though, got some pole positions after the summer break. They started on pole in Spa, Monza, Singapore, Kota as well. So they still had their chances, but yeah, by the second half of the season, Ferrari had too much going against them, really. And I guess the only positive in the second half of the season from Ferrari's point of view is they didn't actually make too many mistakes in the second half of the season. The reason that is, though, is because there wasn't any pressure on them, because there wasn't a championship to fight for. They'd already blew it by, race 8, race 9 of the season. So, yeah. That's why I think they weren't making any big mistakes anymore. And for, for this season, obviously, what I described in Spain, Monaco, Baku, those mistakes and really bad reliability cost them massively in being able to fight for the championship. But also, they committed more big errors on strategy with Charles Leclerc at the British Grand Prix that cost him a victory there and cost him victory in Hungary. Leclerc crashed in France. And then there was a couple other, I think, strategy issues later in the season. So even if they had got through the Spanish, Monaco, and Azerbaijan Grand Prix with, maximum points that they could realistically have got from those Grand Prix, they would have cost it themselves the championship later on anyway, because this team just are not competent enough to be fighting for world championships. They've got the resources and the money of a front-running team, but they perform like a team fighting for 6th or 7th in the championship. So, yeah, it's not really surprised they weren't able to really contend for the title in the second half of the season. And yeah, disappointing year for Ferrari. And even though I think they would have still finished in second this season, they should have pushed Red Bull a lot harder. And when you look at it, at the end of the day, 12 pole positions they had in 2022. If you have 12 pole positions in a season, you've got to be winning, really, at least 8 of those races. They only won 3 of those races where they started on pole, which is 25%? That's just simply not good enough. Winning 1 in 4 races when on pole. That is not good enough at all. And Ferrari, if they next season produce a car that is once again very quick in qualifying, that's another thing they've got to improve on, is converting their qualifying efforts into actual race results on the Sunday. That's what they need to do. And, that would help them massively in the championship next season if they were to be title contenders in 2023. But, Ferrari have just not been good enough this season. And we are hearing now rumours that Matteo Binotto, the current team principal, is possibly on his way out as team principal. I don't know if he's on his way out of the team. Maybe he'll go back to being a technical director or something like that. But we are hearing that Frederick Vasseur, the current Alfa Romeo team boss, is on his way to Ferrari to be team principal starting in the new year, which would be a step in the right direction, no doubt about it. But we will see whether Ferrari, do make that step in the right direction. Hopefully they do. But again, I don't think Ferrari would have won the championship this season. But at least, if you're going to try and put up a fight, at least put up the best fight you can. And if you still lose, then you still lose. But Ferrari didn't put up the best fight they could, and they were nowhere near putting up the best fight they could towards Red Bull. And as I said, if you're getting 12 or starting on pole 12 times in a season out of 22 races, you've got to be winning, at least 8 of those races. Also, if you're going to be winning a championship, you need to be winning at least 8, if not 10 races in a season. So, yeah, simply not good enough from the Scuderia, and another failure of a season. The title drought goes on now to 2023, and 15 years now since their last championship in 2008 when they won the Constructors World Championship. But let's quickly get into the drivers, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Leclerc has been really good this season. Yeah, he's had the odd race here or there where he's not been maybe at his best, but he has been very good this season. In qualifying, he has been the best driver in 2022, no doubt about it. Most pole positions this season, and has been stunningly quick over a single lap. And I think most people would agree that Leclerc has been the best driver in qualifying this season. And yeah, he got 9 pole positions in 2022, which is a very impressive record for Leclerc to have. And even in the races, even despite Ferrari screwing him over as much as they did, 90, if not 95% of the time, Leclerc really did the best he could with what he had. So, yeah, I can't complain really at all about Leclerc's season. Yeah, he made a couple big mistakes this season. Obviously, one of them costing him potentially a win or at least second place. But those didn't really have an effect on why he finished in second. Even if he had not made those mistakes, he still would have finished in second and would have been miles away from Max Verstappen because, yeah, his team just didn't give him a fighting chance to be world champion in 2022. But Charles Leclerc, without doubt, if you put him in a team like Red Bull with the type of car Red Bull have had this season compared to the other teams, and Red Bull, obviously they've outperformed all the other teams by quite a bit. On-track performance, obviously the design of the car's been very good. If you put Leclerc in a car like that, I'm sure Charles Leclerc would be a world champion, and he's definitely a future world champion. He just needs Leclerc the opportunity. That's all he needs, is the opportunity. He is absolutely good enough to win world titles. He just needs the opportunity. For Carlos Sainz quickly. Carlos, yeah, disappointing season. Thankfully did improve quite a bit in the second half of the season. But yeah, for the first 3 quarters of the season, I wasn't really that impressed by Carlos. The start of the season, I thought he was pretty poor up until really the Canadian Grand Prix, where he had a good weekend there and nearly won that race. And then the race after that, won at Silverstone. It was a good win, but I don't think he deserved to win that Grand Prix. I think Charles Leclerc was really the deserving winner, but of course was screwed over by Ferrari on strategy. And then, of course, Sainz, the race after that, then had a blow-up in Austria where he was going to complete a Ferrari 1-2. Ferrari were incredibly quick at that Grand Prix. And then, yeah, France and Hungary, Hungary, he was pretty decent in Hungary, but France, not so great, I would say. And then, yeah, second half of the season. When I mean second half of the season, I mean, the races after the summer break. Yeah, definitely better compared to Leclerc, but still Leclerc better, in my opinion, than Carlos Sainz in 2022. And if Carlos next year can, for the whole season really, obviously bar the odd race here or there, if Carlos Sainz can if he can next season perform how he's ended this season, then, if Ferrari improve operationally quite a bit and they have a much faster car next season, there's no reason why Carlos can't win, 2 or 3 more races and possibly, you never know, be a title contender. We'll see in 2023. But yeah, I think with Sainz, obviously qualifying, very disappointing from him, because last year, 2021 in qualifying, he was pretty competitive with Leclerc. This year, as I'll get into in a moment, not as competitive with Leclerc. And yeah, really, in the first half of the season, Leclerc was all over him and mauling him to death in qualifying. In the races, it was a lot better for Sainz. But again, a lot of the time, Carlos beat Leclerc because of things out of Leclerc's control. So we have to remember that in regards to those stats that I'll get into in a moment. But yeah, not a good season for Sainz, and I would say he's been one of the most disappointing drivers in 2022. Not the most disappointing, but one of the most disappointing for sure, because I expected quite a bit more from him this season. Obviously, he hasn't been helped by the incompetence of his team, but yeah, I expected a bit more from him, and him to be at least a bit closer to Leclerc in 2022. But before we go on to the next team, let's now go on to those stats regarding the two Ferrari drivers and how they performed against each other in 2022. So Charles Leclerc was 15-7 over Carlos Sainz in qualifying. Yeah, pretty clear Leclerc was better on a Saturday. In the races, Leclerc still beat Sainz 12-10. And what do you call it? Actually, that stat is, it should actually be, I think, I don't know why I put 12-10, because obviously they had a double DNF in Baku, so it should be, 11-9, I think, actually, in Leclerc's favour, I'm pretty sure. But, yeah, despite Leclerc being screwed over, I would say more so than Carlos was this season, Leclerc still outperforming Carlos in the races. I will say, though, Carlos did have quite an excessive amount of DNF, 6 in total. And, yeah, hopefully Ferrari are a bit more reliable next season. Because it's not just affected them, it's affected Alfa Romeo as well, as we'll get into later. And, yeah, Leclerc, 3 wins to Carlos's only and first win of his Formula 1 career that he got at Silverstone. But, Ferrari, another thing they need to do next season is, if Leclerc starts the season off like he did this season in comparison to Sainz and is clearly faster, they have got to make Leclerc clearly their number one driver and forget any of this rubbish about, equal driver status, because, Leclerc, I think this season really should have been getting the clear number one treatment from Ferrari, because he's been clearly the better driver in 2022. But yeah, that's Ferrari. Like I said, I've got a 2-part season review coming up on them in December, so I'll get a bit more in depth about each race and how it all fell apart for them next month. But we'll now go on to Mercedes-Benz, who have been the most disappointing team in 2022. Of course, they, from 2014 till 2021, won the Constructors' Championship in every season. And they are, the greatest team of all time. No doubt about it. That run they went on of championships was unprecedented, and they were so incredibly dominant during that period that, this season was a real shock. Only 1 win out of the 22 races, and it took till the 21st race of the season to get that only win of the year that George Russell got. And George Russell, of course, that was his first win of his Formula 1 career in Brazil. But, Mercedes, the reason they struggled this season is because, really, the design philosophy of the car, the zero side pod design, just wasn't the right design. They were the only team to go for that design, and it did not make their car competitive. They had a lot of porpoising, and they were struggling a lot at higher speeds, not just down the straights, and they have been all season struggling down the straights, but also in high-speed corners at the very start of the season. They were struggling because of the porpoising, and the car was quite unstable compared to how it would be, a few races later in the season. But those first 5 races were really tough for Mercedes, and looking back, maybe at the time I said that they were the 3rd fastest team, but looking back, I'd say they probably weren't. Bahrain probably, yeah, they were. Saudi Arabia, I guess they were, but it was pretty close with Alpine. In Australia, them and McLaren were pretty close on pace until really the second half of the race. Imola, they were not the quickest or third quickest team. They were probably the fifth best team at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. That was their worst Grand Prix of the season, no doubt about it, in terms of pace and performance. And what do you call it? Yeah, then in Miami, Valtteri Bottas and the Alfa Romeo outqualified both of them and would have beaten both of them in the race, I think, if Bottas had not clipped the wall in Miami out of the final corner. So, yeah, those first 5 races were really tough for them. They were not a front-running team. They were basically a midfield team, and the only front-running teams we had were Red Bull and Ferrari. But then at the Spanish Grand Prix, they started to improve on the floor of this car, which has been the main point of weakness for the Mercedes team. And yeah, they improved the car's pace by probably 2 or 3 tenths of a second, and they definitely cut down on the porpoising, which we saw, a lot in the at least first half of 2022. And yeah, Spanish Grand Prix, remember, they were very quick. Obviously, Russell finished on the podium. Lewis Hamilton would finish in 5th. But with the pace he showed, Hamilton probably could have been a contender for victory there had he not had contact with Kevin Magnussen on the first lap of that Grand Prix and then had a water leak, I think it was, at the very end of that race that slowed him right down. So, yeah, they definitely improved a lot of that Grand Prix. And that was really the start of where, they moved on with their, the progression and development of their car. And then a couple of races after that were pretty difficult. Monaco and Baku, where they were right back off the pace again compared to Red Bull and Ferrari. And the reason is because those circuits, Monaco and Baku, very bumpy, and they just struggled a lot at those tracks. And as we saw this season, because they have had a real lack of mechanical grip, their speed in the slow corners, which you do get a lot of those around a street circuit, of course, was very poor. And that's another reason why, at the start of the season especially, they were so slow. They would, though, improve in the high-speed corners, and that would become their main strength, I would say, in terms of where their car was quick, or not so quick, in, certain corners or certain conditions. But one thing that was also good this season was that, they were always much quicker in the races than they were in qualifying, except for, the odd race here or there. And really, from the Canadian Grand Prix until the end of the season, we saw that Mercedes were not maybe all the time as quick or quicker than Red Bull and Ferrari, but at worst, only slightly slower, and at times, as quick, if not quicker, than one of those 2 top teams. And that's what brought them a lot closer to fighting for victories again. Lewis Hamilton nearly won the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, and Mercedes at that Grand Prix also improved their car quite a bit by another, say, quarter of a second, with further upgrades to the floor area, and I think to the front wing as well. And after that, we saw them finish 2nd and 3rd in France and Hungary. Obviously, in Hungary, this man on screen, George Russell, finished on pole position in qualifying. A big step forward for them. And then after the summer break, because Ferrari suffered after that, technical directive that was issued, that helped Mercedes quite a bit to get even more podiums in the second half of the season. In Holland, Monza, USA, Mexico, Brazil as well. And they would also have a few chances, good chances, at winning Grand Prix that really they should have won. The Dutch Grand Prix, they were the quickest team that weekend in the race, and they should have won that race if it wasn't for a bit bad luck, but also poor strategy on their end. US Grand Prix, I wouldn't say they necessarily had the best car, but they had a very good chance. Of course, as you can see on your screen, Lewis Hamilton was leading from Max Verstappen until Verstappen, with just a few laps to go, overtook Hamilton for the win. Mexico, they were very quick, but just didn't deliver the laps they should have in qualifying, and then got the strategy wrong in the race. But then, thankfully, in Brazil, as you saw a few pictures ago, they got the sprint race win with George Russell, and they ended up starting the race on the front row and ended up getting a 1-2 in the Grand Prix after what was quite a messy and exciting Grand Prix. And yeah, it was a deserved win for them because they definitely deserved to win at least one race in 2022. Because like I said, there's been a couple other races this season that really they should have won. Again, Dutch Grand Prix, maybe you could say US Grand Prix, even maybe the Hungarian Grand Prix. You could say they probably should have won. Obviously, if Lewis Hamilton had not had his DRS issue, he really could have won that race in Hungary right before the summer break. So, yeah, they definitely deserve to get a win in 2022. And, yeah, last race wasn't too great for them. But I think even though they finished in third, it's a disappointing season for them. And it's the first time they've finished outside the top two in the championship since 2012, 10 years ago, where they finished in fifth in the championship. I think Mercedes can still be proud that they were able to win with this car that was so bad at the start of the season, but also the progression they made with this car was, you know, brilliant. It really, really was. They improved the car by about, what, 5 to 7 tenths of a second compared to Red Bull and Ferrari from, say, the start of the season until the end. And that's, you know, with the less amount of development you can really do in this current era of Formula One compared to a couple years ago and before. And, you know, with the lack of aero testing time that teams now have in the wind tunnel compared to, again, what they used to have a few years ago, that's really impressive to gain that much time on your what they were hoping to be in 2022. Main rivals for the championship, but of course it did not play out that way. But yeah, they can be very proud of that in the way they developed the car, and they nearly finished second in the championship despite being so far behind Ferrari after 7 or 8 races in the season. So yeah, they should be, I think, pretty proud of the development and progression they made this season. Next season we're hearing they're going for a new philosophy. We'll see how that plays out. Hopefully they can start the season off at least half a second closer to Red Bull and Ferrari than they were this season, because then if they make a good progression next year with development, and of course remember they'll have more aero testing time available to them in 2023 than they had in 2022, because they finished third in the championship as opposed to first from last year. And that's another reason why their development this season was very impressive, because they had the, because they had the least amount of aero testing time available to them. Yeah, I think they've got a good chance next season at least contending for the championship, as long as they start a few tenths of a second closer to, say, Red Bull at the start of 2023 than they were at the start of 2022. At the start of 2022... the gap was about a second per lap between the top two and Mercedes. If they can be at worst half a second a lap off, say in qualifying trim, then they've got a good chance next season, no doubt about it. But for the drivers, Lewis Hamilton's had a bit of a messy season, and it has been a record-breaking season in a bad way for the first time for him in his Formula One career. This is Lewis's first season in his F1 career, and possibly his entire racing or karting career, where he's not had one pole position or one race win. Never thought I'd see the day where that happened, given he's always been in a front-running car and he's the best driver of all time. But yeah, that's what happened in 2022. Quite extraordinary that happened. And yeah, for for this season, Hamilton didn't start the season off that well. Certainly the first 8 races, he was struggling to get to grips with the car. Was doing a bit more experiments with the setup of the car than Russell was doing at the start of the season, so that definitely compromised him a bit. in those first 8 Grand Prix. But also, like I said, he just was struggling with the handling of the car, and Russell was getting on a lot better with the handling than Hamilton was. But once we got from the Canadian Grand Prix until the end of the season, Hamilton was quite clearly the better driver than Russell in 2022. And from Canada until the end of the season, the only races where Russell beat Hamilton this season was Spa, Zandvoort, Monza, and Brazil and Abu Dhabi. So, 5 races out of the final 14? So, yeah, clearly proves that Hamilton, from the Canadian Grand Prix on, really was the better driver. And for me, was the better driver this season. And the stats, I think, do prove that as well. Even though it was a really close battle this season between Hamilton and Russell. And it's good to see this battle developing. And if next season they do have a title contending car, this is going to be a really exciting fight in 2023. No doubt about it. For George Russell, great season. Not the best season he could have had. I think, he's definitely in the second half of the season, he committed, some errors, some poor errors when it came to racing certain cars and crashing into certain cars. But, yeah, at the start of the season, and really for the majority of the season, he was very, very good, and if not great at times, especially with the car he was driving that was, at the start of the season especially, very, very slow compared to, say, the Red Bulls and Ferraris. And of course, he got Mercedes' only pole position and race win of the season, and started on pole twice in 2022, even though his, him starting on pole in Brazil doesn't count as a pole position because he didn't get pole in Friday qualifying, which is officially 2022. On a sprint weekend, that's how you get pole position officially on the record books. But yeah, Russell, great season. Obviously, that race win he had was, just such a great drive from him. He was so quick. Mercedes' car was so quick, and he was clearly the best driver that weekend was George Russell, and thoroughly deserved to get that victory. And I'm very happy he got that victory because Russell is going to be a world champion in the future. More than one world championship will be heading his way in his career. And he is going to be, once Lewis Hamilton retires, hopefully not for a while, Russell will be his replacement in terms of, the next best British driver around at the moment. Obviously, we don't know what British drivers could come onto the grid in the future. We'll have to see. But yeah, I think Russell is, the next best British driver, and is probably, you'd have to say, the future leader of the Mercedes F1 team as well. So yeah, great to see Russell get that first win, and hopefully now his confidence will be massively boosted going into 2023. Mercedes will start the season off with a much faster car, and he will be in a great position next season to contend for his first ever world championship. One thing that he was very good at this season, of course, was consistency. He had so many top 5 and even top 4 finishes in 2022. And if next season Mercedes are quite a bit quicker, that consistency, with quite a few race wins as well, really could be the key to winning a world championship. Obviously, consistency is key to winning a championship. You can win, 10 races in a season. If the other 12, 13 races you're not on the podium, you're probably going to miss out on winning the championship. So, yeah, that consistency, great to see from Russell. And if he can produce that next season, and really for the future, that will help him out a lot in his Formula 1 future when it comes to possibly winning world championships. But yeah, great season for him. And Mercedes, really, I would say, except for the odd race here or there, they did the best job they could in 2022. But let's get on to the stats comparing Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. So in qualifying, it was 13-9 in Lewis Hamilton's favour. In the races, though, it was 12-10 in George Russell's favour. So, yeah. You'd have to say, pretty much, yeah, Russell just about was the better driver on the Sunday. And what helped him out there, of course, was the start of the season, where Russell, I think in the first 8 races, Russell beat Hamilton in 7 of those first 8 Grand Prix. So yeah, that was a great start that he desperately needed in the end if he was going to beat Hamilton in the championship, which he did. Because of course Hamilton ended the season quite a bit better than Russell. Lewis, though, did have an extra DNF, but we have to remember that one of his DNFs, obviously, was yesterday. He couldn't do anything about that. But the other one, where he cost himself probably a podium at Spa, he took himself out of the race, really, by turning in and crashing into Fernando Alonso. So, yeah, I don't think Hamilton, was massively unlucky this season. I mean, he was unlucky in a few races, but it's not like Hamilton had, quite a bit more DNFs in 2022. And in the battle for, podiums this season, it was 9 apiece between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Of course, one of Russell's podiums was a race win. So I guess you could say Russell kind of wins out that fight because one of his podiums was a win. But yeah, this was the closest fight in 2022 statistically in terms of the teammate battle. And this is the best driver lineup on the grid, without a doubt. There is no other driver lineup on the grid, I think, that really rivals this one in terms of pure quality. And obviously you got, 7-time world champion in Lewis Hamilton. And with Russell, I think he's a potential, 2 to 3-time world champion, possibly in the future as well. So, yeah, definitely the best driver lineup on the grid. And if they've, again, got a competitive car next season, then we'll see just how close and competitive they are with each other, possibly fighting for the World Championship. But now, guys, I'm going to move on to the midfield teams. So keep your comments coming in the live chat. Just want to say quickly that, yeah, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because I will be uploading plenty of content in the winter break. I've got a recorded video coming out on Friday, going more in depth into how Max Verstappen won his 6th world. Why do I keep saying 6th world championship? His 2nd world championship. I think the reason I keep saying that is because the last time I did that sort of video, I did it for Lewis Hamilton when he won his 6th world title. But anyway, that's going to come out on Friday. And then on Sunday, I will be going live at 12 p.m. UK time. Again, don't know the topic as of yet, but I will be going live for probably a couple of hours on Sunday. So make sure to join me for that. And there'll be plenty of content through December, January, and February as well. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe right there. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash the like button. Obviously does help the channel grow. But now let's go into the midfield. And we will start not with McLaren, but with the team that actually finished in 4th place. And of course, that is Alpine. What a season they had. Wasn't expecting them to finish in 4th this season. I thought they would be at best in 5th, but quite far away from the top 4 teams. And yeah, 4th place, a great result for them. And, they did the best they could in the Constructors' Championship this season. As I said yesterday, not all of their results were the best they could have got. Obviously, they had quite a lot of reliability problems, especially on Fernando Alonso's side, and probably missed out on a couple podium opportunities in 2022 with Alonso in Melbourne and in Montreal as well. So things could have been better for Alpine if they'd been a bit more reliable this season. But still a great season. Alonso and Ocon were the best performing midfield, duo, team lineup in that midfield pack. They were consistently scoring points when, as teammates, when all the other midfield teams weren't really at all. And of course, both of their drivers were also performing at a very high level. It wasn't just down to the car, it was also down to Fernando Alonso having a great season, and Esteban Ocon having a very good season as well. So, yeah, great job by both drivers. And Alpine, I think it was pretty clear from the start of the season, Alpine had a very good car. Because I remember at the Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, they were 6th and 7th on the grid. And, yeah, they had, already double points finishes straight away in 2022. So it was pretty clear that straight away from the off that Alpine had good speed, especially compared to their main rivals, McLaren, who we'll get into next. But another thing that was impressive with Alpine this season is, and Otmar Safnauer said this, I think in Brazil, that, every development piece they brought to the car, it worked and made the car quite a bit quicker. And we saw that with that new floor they brought to the Singapore Grand Prix, that they improved their car's pace by quite a bit and even closed the gap partially to the front three teams for a couple races there. So, yeah, Alpine developed very well this season to maintain their advantage over McLaren in 2022. And, they've just had consistently the best car in the midfield pack this season. As for the drivers, Fernando Alonso, great season, proving that he can still fight for wins, podiums, and probably world championships. But obviously doesn't have the car to be able to do so. We hope he does sometime in the future. Despite the DNFs, really should have had at least one podium in 2022. And for Esteban Ocon, I mean, he wasn't as good as Fernando this season, but he did a lot better compared to Fernando than I expected. I expected Fernando to be, with the way Fernando started the season, I expected Fernando to be, pretty clearly better than Ocon this season, with Ocon struggling. But Ocon, did pretty well this season. Again, didn't do as well as other teammates Alonso's had, such as, of course, Lewis Hamilton, and obviously didn't beat Alonso in qualifying, in their qualifying head-to-head or race head-to-head, I don't think. But, did finish head in the Drivers' Championship, even though Alonso had so many more DNFs. That's still something for Ocon to take forward, and that should give him quite a bit of confidence going into 2023, as he will be teammates with Pierre Gasly. But, he's, after Lewis Hamilton, he's probably the closest teammate on performance Alonso's had since, Jarno Trulli at Renault, like 15, nearly 20 years ago. The only other teammate I can think of is maybe Jenson Button when they were at McLaren. So, Alonso, a lot of the time has had teammates where, it's just pounded them into the dirt. Fisichella, Massa, Van Dorn, Piquet, Grosjean. So, Alonso, again, he's been the better driver, but Ocon has definitely proven that he is, I would say now, not firmly in the top 10, but I would say Ocon is now one of the top 10 best drivers in Formula 1. Probably in 10th place, maybe 9th place at best, but I'd say he's one of the top 10 best drivers in Formula 1 now. He's had a very good last 2.5 years, and that's been good to see from Ocon, and hopefully he continues on that in 2023, and the Alpine car can maintain their performance next season. The only thing is, with Alpine, is, like I said yesterday, McLaren and Aston Martin, because they start the season off quite a bit slower than Alpine, and improved quite a bit this season, those are the two teams that are probably going to make the biggest step forward next season. Certainly at the start of the season compared to how they started this season. So, those are the two teams Alpine need to concentrate on beating in 2023, and it will be a much tougher season next season, there is no doubt about it. And of course, losing Fernando Alonso to Aston Martin will not help them, because Alonso definitely helped them quite a bit in their fight to finish 4th in the championship. But let's get into some stats regarding Alonso versus Ocon. So in qualifying, pretty close, but Alonso finishing ahead, 12-10 in Alonso's favour. And Ocon should definitely be happy with that qualifying effort, even though, he didn't end up out qualifying him for the season. In the races, Ocon 12-9 wins that battle. The thing is, though, Alonso had 6 DNFs to Ocon's 2, so we have to remember that. And I think if Alonso had the same amount of DNFs as Ocon had, then Alonso probably would have been equal, if not slightly ahead of Ocon in terms of the race battle there. Stat that is just above the DNF one there. And then the bottom stat, where it says Alonso 14, Ocon 16 in PFs. PFs means points finishes. So Ocon had 16 points finishes in 2022, and Fernando had 14, which is great for Ocon. But again, Alonso did have 4 more DNFs than Ocon in 2022. So yeah, this was a good close battle. And again, Ocon proved a lot this season, but I would say Alonso has been the better driver in 2022. But Ocon can definitely be proud of how he performed this season. But now we'll move on to the McLaren team. And yeah, they're not the biggest disappointment team-wise of the season, but they are one of the disappointments this season. There is no doubt about it. Coming into 2022, my even expectation, never mind hope, was that they would, even if they were to still finish 4th in the championship this year, that they would close the gap to the front-running teams, because it was a new set of regulations. They've got a decent technical team. We've seen that, from 2019, 2020, 2021. They've got a decent technical team. They've had a decent car during that time, and we know they're capable of producing a decent car. My hope was that they would start to close the gap, and they start the season off with a car quite a bit worse than we expected. Of course, the brake issues they had in Bahrain really hurt them quite a lot, because they couldn't do as much running in testing and the first weekend, and they couldn't understand their car as well as other teams. And yeah, we're struggling quite a bit in those first 2 Grand Prix, even though Lando Norris did finish 7th in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Very impressive result there, considering how slow McLaren were. But yeah, I think McLaren, with those brake issues, it definitely did not help them at the start of the season. Bounced back a lot, though, in the following 2 races. In Australia, 5th and 6th it was for them. And then Lando Norris got a podium, as you can see here, at Imola, finishing in 3rd. Obviously benefited a lot from Leclerc's silly spin, but at the end of the day, Norris kept it on track and got a great result for the team. And after that, I thought McLaren were going to start really being, at least the best midfield team in 2022. And I thought they were going to start putting some pressure on Mercedes, because they had in those particular races. But then, after that, we started to see the real deficiencies of the McLaren car. The biggest one, lack of straight line speed. Not totally their fault. The Mercedes power unit this season, probably the weakest in terms of power output. But their car this season, the biggest reason they've been so slow, or, much slower than expected, is because their car is a lot draggier than other cars on the grid. And they have improved on it. That's why, for example, in, yesterday's Grand Prix, they were very quick around a pretty high-speed track. And even the Italian Grand Prix, they were very quick at that Grand Prix. And by then had made a lot of progress on the amount of drag their car fundamentally has. But with all that drag they have, or had for 2022, it meant that they were just an extra few tenths of a second slower than they really should have been with their car. And that just cost them throughout the season. Again, it got better, but it still cost them some lap time throughout the season when they really needed it most. And they also, with the aero package they had in 2022, it was a good one in terms of, when we came to the higher downforce tracks, McLaren's car was pretty good in the midfield, but it didn't really become very good and clearly, one of the best midfield cars until the French Grand Prix, where they brought a pretty big upgrade to that Grand Prix, which was a completely revised side pod and I think barge board area, and the side pod a lot like the Red Bull side pod. And you can see here actually with this picture, the McLaren side pods at the time in Australia looking a bit different to the ones they had at the French Grand Prix and after that as well. So yeah, that upgrade was massive for them. They gained quite a bit of time with that, say a third of a second, and that really helped them in their fight for fourth in the championship. But at the end of the day, the reasons they didn't finish fourth in the championship, not only because their car was not as good this season as I think we expected it to be, but they really only had one driver to rely on, Lando Norris. Daniel Ricciardo was poor, very poor this season, didn't perform anywhere near to the potential of the car for 99% of the season. Lando Norris had a really good season, and I think can be proud of how he did in 2022. It's hard, I've got to be honest, to say how well he was or how well he did this season in comparison to the whole grid, because obviously the 2021 McLaren was a lot closer to the front of the field and we could make a better judgment of just how good Lando was last season. But for this season, because the McLaren was quite far off and a bit further off, yeah, it's a bit harder to say exactly how good Lando was compared to everyone on the grid. But he had a very good season, there's no doubt about it. Most of the time he was, doing the best really he could with the McLaren car and maximising the potential of the car. And continued really on the good work he did in 2021, but was just, was hurt, I guess you could say, by the lack of pace McLaren had in 2022. But yeah, because Ricciardo wasn't really a factor in most races, that's what hurt McLaren from, being able to fight healthily, from fighting for fourth in the championship. And even though Alpine's car was quicker this season, McLaren, in the end, they only finished 14 points off. So if Ricciardo had performed a lot better this season and had performed, a bit more like we expected him to be, when he signed for McLaren probably would have finished in fourth place, which would have been a good save considering the underwhelming season they've had pace-wise. So, yeah, it's really been that's cost them this season, along with obviously the slower car. But yeah, the lack of help from Ricciardo has really cost them in 2022. Well, Lando Norris, of course, he's obviously at McLaren next season, and I'm sure if the McLaren car is a bit closer to the front of the field, which I think it will be, compared to how it was at the start of 2022, I'm sure he'll be in a good position next season to get even more great results and maybe a couple more podiums in 2023. And of course, replacing Daniel Ricciardo at McLaren is Oscar Piastri. Very excited to see how he gets on. I think Piastri will have a decent first season, very similar to Norris's first season in F1 back in 2019, where, there's a few really good results in there compared to his teammate, but most of the time, back in 2019, Sainz was better than Norris, and I think you'll see that in 2023 with Norris most of the time ahead of Piastri. And really, I think it'll be the second year where we'll see Piastri in 2024 really show how good he is, because obviously it is Lando's team. But disappointing season, but there's no reason next season why they can't get back up to at least fourth in the championship. But let's just quickly compare the drivers. There's not really much to compare, I've got to be honest. 20-2 in qualifying. Obviously, Lando winning that battle compared to Ricciardo. Lando 16-5 over Daniel in the races. Daniel did have 2 more DNFs, but that didn't make a difference, really. And in terms of points finishes, Lando had 17 and Daniel had 7. So, yeah, Lando, very good season. Daniel, not so much at all, as I'll get into later when I do my full driver rankings for all 20 permanent drivers for 2022. But, yeah, let's hope McLaren a bit better next season, because they, I had big hopes for them coming into this season, but they just didn't quite deliver on those hopes. Now, I'm going to try, because we've already been going for an hour and 25 minutes, I'm going to try and now, obviously, go through the rest of the teams. So we're now going to Alfa Romeo. I'm going to try and be a bit quicker now, because I don't want to be, again, hanging around for ages with this stream. So Alfa Romeo, great season. And we're actually, despite having a great season, jumping up from 9th to 6th in the championship, obviously from 2021 where they finished in 9th. They were also quite unlucky this season because at the start of the year, with the original, I think, was it minimum or maximum weight limit? I can't remember exactly what the number was. Alfa Romeo were the only team abiding by basically the regulations, or not just abiding by the regulations, but were, not having to cut more weight off their car than other teams were, such as Red Bull, especially Williams as well. And obviously the FIA, they made a alteration to the regulation in that area, and that really hurt Alfa Romeo, because if the FIA did not decide to alter that regulation, Alfa Romeo at the start of the season could have been a front-running team. So it is a shame that happened, because they could have been, on the podium. They could have maybe even won a Grand Prix. You never know at the start of this season, and that would have been a real feel-good story. They still, though, start the season off very well. Valtteri Bottas scored points in every Grand Prix in the first 8 races, bar 2, which was Jeddah and Azerbaijan. And yeah, it was a great start to the season. And Alfa Romeo at one point were 5th in the championship, and even 4th in the championship, I think they were at one point. So yeah, it was a great start to the season for Alfa Romeo. We're looking great. But then, because they lack the finances, they couldn't develop as much as other teams, and they lacked the amount of money, to be able to operate, I think, at the level of the cap, and to develop their car as much as really they wanted to. They did bring a couple slight upgrades towards the end of the season, but really from the British Grand Prix on, which was halfway through the season, they didn't really upgrade their car at all after that. So yeah, that really cost them from having, even better results for the rest of 2022, but still hung on to a deserved 6th place. Aston Martin made things tough in the final few races, but in the end did not deliver the results necessary, and Alfa Romeo did just enough to finish in 6th. For the 2 drivers, Valtteri Bottas had a good season, not a great season. He was great at the start of the season, though. He was one of the best drivers at the start of the season. In those first, 8 or 9 races, he was very, very good. But then, as the Alfa Romeo car got slower, a few times got out-qualified and out-raced by Zhou Guanyu, and definitely did not drive as well in the second half of the season, despite driving very well in Mexico and Brazil. In Brazil, was possibly heading for 5th place before the safety car came out, and then in Mexico, qualified in 6th place, and obviously ended up finishing in P10. So, yeah, Bottas, good season, but not a great season, I would say. Zhou Guanyu, kind of similar to Mick Schumacher, except not as good, I would say. Improved as the car got worse in comparison to the other teams, but I'm not really that impressed by Zhou's first season. Again, he's had a few decent races here and there, but except for maybe a couple performances out of the 22 races, he's been pretty mediocre, I would say, in 2022. Again, the lack of pace from the car in the second half of the season did not help, but I wasn't really seeing anything that noteworthy from Zhou this season, again, except for a couple races. The Canadian Grand Prix was his best race of the season, finished in 8th place and qualified in, I think, 9th place. And then there was a very good race in Baku where he was heading for a points finish, and he ended up having an engine failure, I think, of some sorts, which was disappointing. But yeah, except for those 2 races, yeah, it was just a pretty mediocre season from Zhou. And if he had started the season a lot better and was performing at the start of the year like he did at the end of the year, then he would have probably had a better year, because he of course would have had a better year, but he would have had a lot more points, is the point I'm trying to make, because the Alfa Romeo car was a lot better at the start of the season. But I'm very happy they finished in 6th, because they deserve it. Great to see them getting a lot more money, and that will help keep this team obviously afloat and give them a bit more money to develop their car in the next couple seasons. So yeah, good to see from Alfa Romeo, and yeah, I'm hoping next season they can still be pretty competitive. Let's get into the driver battle. In qualifying, Bottas beating Zhou 14-8. I've got to say though, that's not too bad from Zhou in qualifying against Bottas, because we have to remember Valtteri is very, very quick over a single lap. So yeah, I think Zhou's done a decent job in qualifying this year. In the races, 14-7, especially at the start of the season, like I said, I think Zhou should have done better compared to Bottas, because we know Bottas is at his weakest on a Sunday. In DNFs, wow, 6 apiece for Bottas and Zhou. 12 DNFs in total. That Ferrari power unit, easily the most unreliable this season, and Alfa Romeo suffering the most, and that definitely did not help them in 2022. And in terms of points finishes this season, Bottas had 9 and Zhou had just 3. Zhou's 3 points finishes were Bahrain, Canada, and Monza. So yeah, he's got to improve, I think, next season, Zhou, because if he performs compared to Bottas similar to how he's done this season, next season, then I think he'll be out of Formula 1 for 2024. So yeah, need to see something a bit more from Zhou next season. We'll now go on to Aston Martin. And maybe not the most disappointing team. I'd probably say Mercedes are the most disappointing team for 2022, but second place would absolutely have to go to Aston Martin, because we had big hopes for them coming into the season, because we thought, or we knew they had put a lot of work into this set of regulations, but they turned up with a car that was an absolute dog at the start of the season. It was horrible, this Aston Martin car. Thankfully, got a lot better. Also, them having quite a bit more aero testing time available to them with the regulations, because they finished lower down in the 2021 championship. That helped quite a bit for them, improving the way they did. Yeah, for them to be at the start of the season, say 8th quickest on the grid, probably at best, and to end the season about 5th or 6th quickest, at least in the races, that's a good, very good progression. And of course, they've ended up finishing in the same position in the championship. So if they do start off next season a lot quicker and possibly at the front of the midfield, because of that bit extra aero testing time they have for them available to them next season, and with them finishing their wind tunnel, I think, in the next couple months, hopefully, the new wind tunnel they've been building for the last, I think, year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, next season they could be the most improved team next season. So watch out for them. Of course, they've got Dan Fallows now at the team, and of course he started back in May. He was a designer at Red Bull, and obviously I'm sure he helped in the development of the Aston Martin car this season. And they've hired other good technical people, I think, from Mercedes and Red Bull as well. So yeah, they should make a difference for Aston Martin. But yeah, in the end, a poor season. They should have been really contending with Alpine and McLaren this season. Maybe not finishing 4th, but at least contending with those teams. With the drivers, Sebastian Vettel, great season for him. Obviously, his last season in F1, I think it will be. I mean, you never know what could happen in the future. But yeah, Sebastian Vettel, last season in F1. What a season it was. Not every Grand Prix, but most of the season, he did the best he could with what was a pretty difficult car to drive. And had many great results. He had a 6th place in Baku, a 6th place in Japan, an 8th in Singapore. Was heading probably for 6th place at the US Grand Prix as well. And of course, finishing the points in the last Grand Prix of this season. Obviously, yesterday, finishing in P10. And had other good points finishes as well. I think, was it 9th in Silverstone, 8th at Imola. And yeah, had some good results this season, did Sebastian. And most of the season really did the best he could with the car. And proved that he is still easily good enough for Formula 1. But, just wants to do something else, which is absolutely fair enough. And again, Danke, Seb. Thank you for the career you have given to all of us and to Formula One. And in terms of a human being, Sebastian Vettel is the best human being I think we've seen in Formula One, maybe ever. He is that nice of a person. And yeah, Vettel, yeah, it's going to be sad for him to not be on the grid, as he was, of course, such a vital part of Formula One. For Lance Stroll, I don't think Stroll's had a bad season. I'd say he's had a decent season. I'll also get into my driver rankings later on, and, you know, how I think he does compared to everybody else. But, yeah, for Stroll, I think he's had a decent season. I think he's really been hampered by, like Vettel has, the poor car. Because he has had some really good races this season. Obviously, yesterday in the final race, he finished up in 8th place. Finished in 6th in Singapore. And yeah, had some really good races this season. But yeah, the car just hampered him at times. And is still Stroll lacking in qualifying compared to a lot of the grid and, you know, whoever his teammates are. So still needs to, of course, improve on that. But of course, made a couple really big errors at the US Grand Prix and Sao Paulo Grand Prix, where he was driving quite dangerously and and cost himself quite a few points, cost the team quite a few points as well. So yeah, Stroll, I mean, still young. He's still, what, 23 years old is Lance Stroll? So he's still got time to improve, but there is still some things to improve. You know, racing etiquette, qualifying pace, and consistency still needs some work. But he's had a decent season, Stroll, considering the car he's had to drive. Let's compare the two drivers quickly. So in qualifying, Vettel ends up 13-7 over Stroll. I think that's pretty good from Stroll to end up, to end up out-qualifying Vettel 7 times out of the 20 races that they were teammates for. Remember, of course, the first 2 races of the season, it was Stroll and Hülkenberg at Aston Martin. And then in the races, it was pretty close between the two. Vettel 10-8 over Stroll, but yeah, pretty close. So I think Stroll can be proud of how he's done compared to Sebastian whilst they've been teammates for these 2 years. And then in DNFs, it's been equal, 3 apiece. And then Sebastian Vettel having more points finishes than Lance Stroll. Vettel having 10 and Lance Stroll having 8. So, yeah, Vettel has been the better driver this season, but Stroll, I think, has proven that he's not too far away from being one of the top 10 best drivers in Formula One. Just needs to keep improving, and I'm sure that he could get there. But let's now go on to the final 3 teams, and we'll quickly go through Haas F1. I've already explained, multiple times with Haas F1, why they've not had as good of a season as they were hoping for. Obviously, they concentrated on the 2022 car development for so long. And at the start of the season, they were really quick and, had a 5th place, obviously, in the first Grand Prix. Kevin Magnussen had a very good start to the season, and for a while was in the top 10 of the championship with Magnussen. So, yeah, it was, a great start to the year for the Haas team, but because they lost the Uralkali title sponsorship, obviously with the Mazepins, and they had to get rid of Nikita Mazepin, that really hurt them financially. They couldn't operate at the level of the cap, and they couldn't develop financially their 2022 car, which is why, really, they didn't develop their car at all this season, except for, I think, the big upgrade they brought to the Hungarian Grand Prix, I think it was. So yeah, that was really what cost Haas in 2022. I think fundamentally there was a good car here. They just couldn't develop it as much as they wanted to. So really, Haas F1 could have, you never know what would have happened if they had enough money to operate at the level of the cap. Haas probably could have finished in 6th place in the championship. So, yeah, sad that's happened for Haas. But next year, they've got a title sponsor of MoneyGram, and that will help them a lot. And of course, Nico Hülkenberg replacing Mick Schumacher at the Haas F1 team. Obviously, I've laid out my thoughts. I don't think it really moves Haas any further up the grid, a driver change like that. The only thing that Hülkenberg brings, I think, is obviously more experience and consistency than Mick Schumacher. But Kevin Magnussen, I think, has had a good season. Has tapered off quite a bit towards the end of the season, but I think he's had a good season and delivered some very important results for the team. And I think Magnussen is pretty clearly now he's back in F1, going to be at the Haas team for another few years because he is pretty clearly the team leader at Haas. For Mick Schumacher, not been the best season for him. Definitely could have done better, but again, similar to Zhou Guanyu, as he improved, the car got a lot slower compared to their midfield rivals. So, that was a shame. And actually, in the races this season, Mick was better than Kevin Magnussen. But again, as the car got slower, he just couldn't deliver as many points finishes as Magnussen did in 2022. And Mick Schumacher is definitely good enough to be in Formula 1. There is no doubt about it. He just needs a team that believes in him more and can develop and nurture his talent more than Haas do. I don't think Haas can really develop young talent as well as, say, a team like Sauber can, or obviously AlphaTauri, or even Williams. So, I hope he'll be back on the grid in 2024, and we'll see what he's doing for next season, whether he has a reserve driver role. Looks as though he might be having a reserve driver role for Mercedes, the Mercedes F1 team. So we'll see how that is in 2023. But in terms of this season for Haas, not as good as they hoped, but not really under their control in regards to that. But let's go into the stats comparing Magnussen and Schumacher. In qualifying, Magnussen clearly better than Mick, 16-6 in qualifying. In the races, though, Mick 13-7 over Kevin Magnussen. So again, in the races, Mick Schumacher was the better driver, but again, just didn't produce those performances at the right time. If he did at the start of the season, I'm pretty sure Mick would have kept his seat at Haas F1. Kevin, though, did have 3 more DNFs, but I don't think it would have made much of a difference. I still think Mick was the better driver on a Sunday. And in terms of points finishes, Mick only had 2 and Kevin Magnussen had 6 in total. Right, we've got 2 more teams to go. 2 more teams to go. Let's get into AlphaTauri. And even though they've dropped 3 positions in the championship, I wouldn't say they've necessarily been massively or notably disappointing. I think really from 2019 until the end of 2021, I think they were really overperforming were AlphaTauri, where, for Toro Rosso, they finished 6th in 2019. Then when they became AlphaTauri, they finished 7th in 2020 and then 6th in 2021. And really, with the pace they had in 2021, they should have been 5th in the championship. They were the 5th quickest team last season. But yeah, this season just didn't produce that good of a car. Aerodynamically, just mediocre. The only tracks really they went well at were high-speed tracks with slow corners, a lot of slow corners such as Baku, Monza, Bahrain. Yeah, those are really the racetracks where they went well at. Anything with higher speed corners, they struggled quite a bit, such as I think the British Grand Prix, they struggled quite a bit in qualifying there, if I remember correctly. And Gasly complained a lot during the season about the lack of speed in the high speed corners. But also, Pierre Gasly, I don't know if it's because of the lack of confidence in the car, but Pierre Gasly, for me, has been the most disappointing driver this season. Because last season, he was so good. He was so good. He was in Q3 almost every Grand Prix. Not just getting into Q3, but qualifying in the top 7, top 8 on the grid pretty much all the time. Even started on the front row of a Grand Prix last year as well in Qatar. And had a podium, of course, last season as well. And had a few other top 6 finishes. yeah, it was a great season last season for Gasly. Probably his best in F1. But yeah, this season, just very disappointing. Yuki Tsunoda a lot more competitive with him this season, something we did not see in 2021. Tsunoda has improved, but Gasly definitely has gone backwards. In qualifying, even though AlphaTauri have been a bit poor with their operational performance this season, Gasly just not able to produce that stunning killer pace we saw in 2021 and even 2020 from the Frenchman. And in the races, I think he's done well in the races this year. But again, because he's not been as good in qualifying this year as he was in 2021, we haven't really seen, anything spectacular then in the races. He did finish in 5th place at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and then 8th at Monza. But yeah, other than that, he didn't really do anything that spectacular in 2022. But I think it was really qualifying where he was most underwhelming compared to obviously how he had done in 2021. For Yuki Tsunoda, yeah, he's improved Tsunoda, but I still need to see quite a bit more from him because, the Red Bull Driver Academy, it's a ruthless system. AlphaTauri is a ruthless team, obviously owned by Red Bull. It's a ruthless team, ruthless system. And if he doesn't really improve on what we've seen this season for next year, then I think there's a decent chance, especially if a Red Bull Academy driver in F2 or F3 next year has a really good year. I think it's a decent chance Tsunoda could be out of F1. Does have Nick De Vries as his teammate for next year. And obviously Gasly going off to Alpine. I think Tsunoda, I think he probably will improve next year, but not sure if it'll be enough to see him really as one of the, top 10 or just outside the top 10 drivers in F1. And for Pierre Gasly, he has to step up massively next year because if he's performing as poorly in qualifying as he has this year, next year with Ocon, he'll get hammered. So he has to be better next year or else he will be, definitely number 2 at Alpine. But with the two drivers, let's just go through their stats. So 13 to 8 for Pierre in qualifying and the race. A lot more competitive, like I said. And Pierre's still winning the fight, and Pierre is still better than Yuki Tsunoda. But again, Pierre not as good this season as he should have been. Tsunoda having 2 more DNFs, 5 to 3 in that aspect. And Gasly, 6 points finishes for him and 4 points finishes for Tsunoda. So yeah, not a one-way fight, a one-way what do you call it? A one-way street, I guess, at AlphaTauri in terms of the driver battle, like it was last season. But yeah, Gasly definitely been very disappointing this year. And finally, for Williams, yeah, they've dropped to 10th in the championship. The car they produced this season just wasn't good enough. Alfa Romeo and Haas, the teams they beat in last year's championship, improved their cars massively and were clearly working on their cars a bit more than Williams were in the last year or so. Not the last year or so, but the last, say, year and a half, 2 years. And yeah, Williams, I wouldn't say they've had a bad season. They've had a few points finishes. They've not been too slow, but yeah, they're back to the absolute basement of Formula One, which of course is not good. And yeah, this season, obviously, Albon, obviously I'll get to him in a moment and how good he's been this season. They had a couple points finishes in the first half of the season, but really in the start of the season, Williams were firmly the slowest team. Then, at the British Grand Prix, they brought, I think, 13 upgrades, basically a new car, to that home Grand Prix of theirs at Silverstone. And from then on, they were a lot more competitive, a lot closer to the people finishing in the top 10. And there were some weekends where they weren't the slowest team on the grid. So, yeah, it was nice to see some improvement there. And if they can start the season off a lot closer to the upper midfield than they did this year, then I don't see why Williams, can't have a bit of a better season, maybe score some more points in 2023. And of course, next year they'll have a better driver lineup because Alex Albon, we'll start with him. Yeah, he's been very, very good this season. I wouldn't say he's had an amazing season, but I'd say probably been a great season, you'd have to say, for Albon. Has benefited, though, from having Nicholas Latifi as a teammate. But, yeah, Albon's been very, very good this season. And, been great to see him bounce back after his year out of F1. And for Nicholas Latifi, the GOAT, obviously now exiting Formula 1. We will remember his points finish in Japan. And obviously that points finish he had in Hungary in 2021 of 7th place. And he was actually running in the podium positions in that Grand Prix, I think, in Hungary last year. But, yeah, Williams, not very quick this season. And, yeah, there's nothing the drivers could do in terms of lifting them off the foot of the championship. And let's just quickly compare Albon and Latifi. So Albon 18-2 over Latifi in qualifying, 16-4 over Latifi for Albon in the races, 5 DNFs apiece, and then Albon 3 points finishes, and his 3 points finishes were in Australia, Miami, and Spa, and Latifi's was in Japan, with Albon ending up 2 points clear of the GOAT, Latifi. But there you go, guys. Those are all of the teams that I have just gone through. So, now I've gone through all the teams, I am now going to get into a few more things. I think the next few things, because I've been going for, nearly 2 hours now in this stream. What I'm going to get into next is my driver rankings for all 20 permanent drivers this season, ranking from 1st to 20th, and how everyone has done this season. And what I want you guys to do in the comments section down below or in the live chat is let me know what your driver rankings are. Try and give me at least your top 10 if you can. That would be great. So yeah, I think I should just get straight into it. And then after that, I will get into probably a couple of polls in the chat as well. So let's start with the best driver of 2022, Max Verstappen. And yeah, he hasn't been, I don't think, at his absolute best in 2022. Hasn't needed to be. But yeah, 15 wins this season. Red Bull, obviously, they've been very quick and performed very well this season, but to be getting 15 wins in a season, you have to have Max as the best driver for 2022. No doubt about it. Thoroughly deserves to win the championship, and yeah, is now set to dominate Formula 1 for the next few years. Second best driver of the season, Charles Leclerc. Qualifying, best driver of the season in that aspect. In the races, he did very well, but again, Ferrari car lacked pace in the races, and Ferrari screwed him over on plenty of occasions, and that's why he lost so many points in the fight for the championship. But yeah, he's had a very good season, and this has definitely been Leclerc's best season in F1, and he's proven that he can win world championships. He just needs the best opportunity, or the right opportunity to be a world champion. Third best driver, Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, didn't start the season off that great, but after, like I said, the Canadian Grand Prix, he was truly superb. And if he had a car as quick as Red Bull and Ferrari for the second half of the season, he would have won probably, 3 or 4 races in 2022. So, yeah, he's still been very good. Still the best driver of all time. I wouldn't say the best driver in the world at the minute. I'd say Max Verstappen is the best driver in the world, but he is still performing at an incredibly high level. There's no doubt about it. And of course, so is his teammate, who is the 4th best driver for me this season, George Russell. As I explained earlier, very consistent, very quick, great win in Sao Paulo, and very impressed with what I've seen from him in 2022. And he is definitely a future world champion, and he's had a great season in 2022. The 5th best driver is Fernando Alonso, the best driver from the midfield teams in 2022. Like I said, was robbed of 2 podiums this season and was consistently getting great results for Alpine that they really couldn't get from many others on the grid. And we have to remember, not only did he miss out on a couple podiums this season, but also had quite a few top 6 finishes in 2022. What was it? France, Silverstone, obviously Sao Paulo. A couple of weeks ago, he had a 5th place there. Trying to think where else he had a top 6 finish. Dutch Grand Prix, Belgian Grand Prix. So, yeah, he's had a really good season, Alonso. And he's proven that if he was in, say, the Red Bull or a Ferrari, that he would still be winning races and still be a consistent contender for, obviously, first place and for the championship, even if he was in a competent enough team. And he's still definitely, at over 40 years old, got the quality to, to still be a front-running Formula 1 driver. The 6th best driver of the season, I've gone for Sergio Perez. The reason I've gone for Perez ahead of the other, drivers like Sainz and Norris and drivers like that is because of how he's closed the gap to Verstappen this season. He's not as far off Verstappen as he was before. And it is pretty hard to be close to Max Verstappen because Verstappen is, the best driver in the world right now. And, for Checo, he's, obviously had 2 great wins this season in very tricky conditions and been super consistent. And I think Leclerc deserves 2nd in the championship, but I think Perez definitely... I think Perez has the right to feel a bit unlucky in not finishing 2nd in the championship, but yeah, top 3 in the championship. He's had a great season, and he absolutely is one of my top 6 best drivers of 2022. Lando Norris is 7th. He's been very good this season. Harder to tell, though, how great he's been compared to the other drivers on the grid because the McLaren car not as close to the, say, Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari cars as it was in 2021. But, he's been super consistent. So many points finishes, 17 points finishes in total. And he is still, I would say, one of the top... 7th best driver this season, but I'd say he's probably still in the top 6 best drivers on the grid currently in Formula 1. In 8th place, I've gone Esteban Ocon. The reason I've gone with him in 8th ahead of Carlos Sainz is because he's been so impressive compared to his teammate Fernando Alonso, who has been so great this season. And Ocon really has proven that he is not an elite driver, not... a driver that could win a championship or anything, but he's proven that he is, a really, really good driver. Absolutely, no doubt about it. And looking, forward to the future, if any team was in desperate need of a number 2 driver or just a competent 2nd driver at a front-running championship-winning or contending team, Esteban Ocon would be a great choice because in the last couple years, he's really proven his quality. The 9th best of the season, Carlos Sainz. Carlos for me has not been that great this season. Way too slow compared to Leclerc in qualifying. And then, for the first 3 quarters of the season, Leclerc was just all over him and Sainz couldn't really compete with him on a consistent basis. And that's why I'm so disappointed with him this season. And he made a few basic errors at the start of the season. Spin in Spain, spin in Australia, the crash with Ricciardo in Imola. So, Sainz, been very disappointing. Hopefully, we see a lot more from him in 2023. And the 10th best driver this season, Sebastian Vettel. The reason I've gone with him in 10th is because, he's driven so well in quite a poor car this year. And looking at the other drivers in the bottom half of the championship, I think, or from, 10th place down, I think he's pretty clearly been the best driver out of those group of drivers. And like I said, it's still easily good enough to be in Formula 1. Now let's get into the bottom 10. In 11th, I've gone with Alex Albon. Maybe you think that's quite high, but the reason is because even though, again, having Nicholas Latifi as a teammate helps, Albon has been super impressive this season, not only with the other points finishes he's had at tracks where you probably wouldn't expect him to, to finish in the points, in Melbourne and Miami, where the car wasn't necessarily suited to those particular circuits. There was other races, Austria, US Grand Prix, even the Grand Prix yesterday, where he wasn't too far away from finishing in the points there. He's had a really good season, really raised his stock by quite a bit in 2022. And, if he keeps this up and the Williams car improves, there's no reason why he can't have a good season in 2023. The 12th best driver, I've gone with Valtteri Bottas. Again, a good season, tapered off quite a bit to the second half of the season. And yeah, if he continued that form from the first 8 races, Bottas probably would be in my top 10. But yeah, was just not performing as well in the second half of 2023 or 2022, sorry. But I'm sure if the Alfa Romeo car next year is good, I'm sure he'll be competitive again. In 13th, I've gone Kevin Magnussen. Kind of the same, really. Start the season well. Obviously, the car being so quick helped. And then tapered off as the car got a bit slower. But yeah, really helped Haas massively deliver 8th place in the championship. And yeah, had a good season. Not a great season, but a good season and a good return to Formula 1. In 14th, I've gone with Lance Stroll. Decent season. Not too bad compared to Sebastian Vettel, but still not quite there in a couple aspects. Like I said, racing situations, qualifying, and still a bit too inconsistent for me is Lance in Formula 1 at the minute. But I reckon next season, if he can make some more improvements, or at least continue improving the way he is definitely improving on those little things I've mentioned, and the Aston Martin car next season is a lot better, Stroll definitely could be one of the top 10 drivers in the championship next season. No reason why he couldn't. 15th, I'll go on Mick Schumacher. Again, was better than, was better than Kevin Magnussen in the races this season, but because he didn't deliver in those first few races, and Magnussen just delivered better for Haas than Mick did, that's why I've got Kevin Magnussen ahead of Mick Schumacher, and as well Magnussen thoroughly outperformed Schumacher in qualifying. But yeah, Mick in 15th. He's still good enough for Formula 1, there's no doubt about it, but there are still some improvements he needs to make if he does come back to F1, such as qualifying and not binning it in the wall massively. Now let's get to my bottom 5. Pierre Gasly in 16th. Like I said, his qualifying performances this season have been very disappointing, and he's been a bit too close to Yuki Tsunoda at times when he should be really beating him quite comfortably. And yeah, for me, the most disappointing driver of the season. And then Tsunoda is in 17th. Tsunoda has improved, but not enough for me. And like I said, if he doesn't improve next season, he could be at risk of losing his seat for 2024. In 18th, Daniel Ricciardo. Ricciardo has been very poor this season, and with Ricciardo, he has he's the reason I've got him down in 18th place is because the McLaren car was one of, I'd say this season, the top 5 cars on the grid, and Ricciardo consistently did not deliver the potential that car had, and that's why I've got him down in 18th place. And then in 19th, I've got Zhou Guanyu. Like I said, did improve in the second half of the season, but I didn't really see enough that much this season that showed that Zhou is actually good enough for Formula 1. So, yeah, need to see more in 2023. And finally, Nicholas Latifi for reasons that are going to be obvious. But there you go, guys. That is my driver rankings. Let me know in the comments section or the live chat what you guys think. And, who you think the top 10 best drivers of the season are. Or if you want to do the whole list, the whole 20, like I've done, then make sure to go for it. But I think I will quickly just do, because I'm pretty much done, I would say, for this season review. I think I'm going to do a couple final polls in the chat. First one is going to be Crystal Racing saying in the chat, by the way, apparently there's been Twitter users who have rated Joe's season very highly for some reason. Yeah, I don't know why. Those people are pretty out there, I've got to say. The first question will be, what do you think was the best race of the season? So let me just quickly do this. What do you think was the best race of 2022? And the options will be the British Grand Prix, the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and what other options should I go for? Trying to think what the races we've had this season. US Grand Prix, I'll put in there as well. And then I'll put in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as well. So quickly, guys, before I go, make sure to vote in that poll at the top of the live chat. What is your best race for 2022? Mine is the British Grand Prix. That's my best race of the season. And let's try and get a few votes. I know there's not many watching, so I'm not expecting there to be a ton of votes, but let's try and get at least 10 votes in that poll. And then I'll quickly do another poll and then we'll end the stream because, yeah, I am pretty tired and I've pretty much done everything in this season review that I've wanted. And, yeah, the final poll will be me asking you guys what you think the overtake of the season is. One of the options will be Leclerc's move on Hamilton at Cops. The other three, I need to think about a bit more. Yeah, I need to think about those other three a bit more. I think another one could be Verstappen on Leclerc at Imola, possibly. Or maybe not because of the DRS effect. Yeah, I just need to think about it, really. Yeah, Leclerc on Hamilton at Silverstone. Leclerc on Verstappen in Austria. That's another good one where he dive-bombed him into turn 4. That was a really good move. And then what other overtakes? I'm trying to think. Maybe you guys can let me know if there's any that spring to mind. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other overtakes, but it's hard. It's hard to remember with this season. Alonso on Bottas in Sao Paulo. That's another one. And then the other one, I'm not sure. Maybe I'll just go for those three. But, yeah, there's not been too many great overtakes this season, I've got to be honest. But, yeah. Let's just quickly see what you guys have to say with this current poll. What do you think the best race of the season was? And, well, currently, the British Grand Prix, Sao Paulo and US Grand Prix all tied on 33%. So let's see if we can get a winner there. Rooksfoot says there was a double or triple overtake. I can't remember, to be honest. Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, it's hard to remember, honestly, going back through the season. Yeah, let's try and get a few more votes, guys, in that poll at the top of the live chat. What is your best race of the season? British Grand Prix, Sao Paulo Grand Prix, US Grand Prix, or Saudi Arabian Grand Prix? Let me know in the live chat. And, yeah, in a few minutes, I'll come off. And then... just a reminder again, on Friday at 12 p.m. UK time, I'll be uploading a video, a more in-depth video about how Max Verstappen won his second World Championship. And then on Sunday, I'll be live at 12 p.m. UK time for a stream. Don't know what the topic is exactly yet, but I will be live for a couple hours on Sunday, so make sure to join me for that as well. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, bottom right of the screen. And if you haven't already, guys, make sure to smash the like button. Of course, does help the channel grow. I think I'll just end the poll quickly. 8 votes. Obviously, there's not many watching. What do you think the best race of the season was? You guys voted for the US Grand Prix as number 1. And then Silverstone and Sao Paulo joint second. And then Saudi Arabia 4th. Actually, that's a good one that I think I said I was going to do. From Crystal Racing, who says K-Mag's poll was the moment of the season. Let me just do that as the final poll. What was the moment of the season? What was the moment of the season? And yeah, Magnussen poll is obviously one option. Another one will be Sainz's first win. And then, what do you call it? Leclerc's, not Leclerc's, what do you call it? Russell's first win will be another option. Let me just do that quick. And then the fourth one. What would the fourth one be? It's hard to, hard to think. What would the fourth one be? The fourth one would be fuck it. I'm just gonna say Latifi scoring points. There you go. That was a good moment. So make sure to vote in this poll now, guys, at the top of the live chat. What was your moment of the season? For me, it was Magnussen's pole in Brazil. Let's try and get a few votes on that, and then I'll come to the end of the stream. And yeah. At the minute, of course, I'm watching the World Cup. If there's any Americans out there, hope you're all enjoying the match at the minute, because USA 1-0 up on Wales and playing better than Wales. And my expectation is that America will go through to the next round. Not ahead of England in the group, but they will go through to the next round because they are better than Wales and Iran. So, yeah. And they look pretty good, I've got to say. America got a pretty good team. Probably the best team they've had in probably about 20 years or so. So, yeah, you never know what could happen. And, of course, they're hosting the next World Cup with Mexico and Canada in 4 years. But, yeah. Let's see if we've got any votes on that poll at the top of the chat. Count Blast says, hey, guys, in late. Hope you guys are all good. Well, yeah, I am about to come off, but it is good to see you, mate. It is very good to see you, of course. You regular of the channel for so many years. And, yeah, I think I'll end the poll in the top of the live chat because pretty clearly one person winning that poll. I asked you guys what was the moment of the season, and you guys answered Kevin Magnussen's poll, number 1, and then Russell's first win, number 2, and then Sainz's first win and Latifi scoring points, 0% for both of those. Rook says, cheers, Chatter. It's been a good 8.5 months since those pre-season testing watch-alongs started off strong, naming the preview review. Yeah. It's, I mean, when testing happened, that feels so long ago. It feels like 2 or 3 years ago, honestly. So much has happened for me since then. Yeah, I even though the season's not been great, it's not been the worst season ever, by the way. I've seen some people on Twitter saying this has been the worst season of all time. It's not. Those must be new fans because clearly, if they were around quite a while, they would have remembered the infamous, or not even infamous, just wasn't infamous or famous for anything, the 2015 season, which was the worst season of all time. It was so boring. There was a few really good races that year, but most of the races that year were just so awful. So awful. Just couldn't wait for them to end because there was nothing that was happening. And that was the only season where I actually started to lose my interest in F1. And I started to watch MotoGP more that year. Not more than F1, but started to watch it more so because F1 just wasn't doing it for me that much that year, but thankfully got a lot better in the following years. Cheers, Crystal Racing, saying great review. And Memnarch says Ferrari did not show up most of the season. Indeed. And also saying US looks pretty well right now, indeed. Yeah, that's it, guys, for this 2022 Formula 1 season review. Cheers, guys, for coming along to the season review. Been great to have you along. And for everyone watching after this stream is finished, yeah, great to have you here watching as well. And again, like I said yesterday, massive thank you to you guys for coming along to all my content during the Formula 1 season. Again, did get... well, it was a bit of a tricky start because obviously I missed the first 3 races because of internet issues, and then I missed the Spanish Grand Prix because of eye operation. But once we got going properly, yeah, we've had a pretty good time here, and I think a very good season on the channel. And then, you know, with the season not being as good as maybe expected and as I hoped, I think, you know, the numbers we pulled with the watch-alongs and stuff this year have been pretty good compared to some competitors out there, you know, considering the size of my channel. And yeah, I think we've had a good season, no doubt about it. And obviously, as the channel grows, if I can do and at least cover the start of next season, that would really help in terms of the numbers for next year. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming along for the streams this year. Obviously, I've still got at least a couple more streams to come this year, so make sure to come along to those. Again, this Sunday, 12 PM UK time, is my next live stream. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming along for the race weekend content and for the actual season itself when it was happening. It's been great fun. But again, for this week, 2 more pieces of content. 12 PM UK time on Friday, I'll be uploading the Max Verstappen how he won his second title video, and then a stream on Sunday at 12 PM. And then for the week after, I think the week after I'm doing a stream on the first Sunday of December, I think. In regards to any other content that week, I don't know yet. We'll have to see. Probably in that week, the week after this one, next week, I think they call it. There's probably only going to be that stream, but there will be the 2-part Ferrari season review coming up, hopefully before Christmas. So there is plenty of content coming your way, and once we get into January and February, I've got plenty of content planned for you guys, and probably I'll do the occasional stream here or there. So yeah, there's still plenty of stuff coming your way, guys, on the channel. Make sure to come along to it. Quickly, again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Before you go, guys, don't forget to smash the like button. It does help the channel grow. And make sure as well to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 or ChazerHD on Twitter. And don't forget to join our Discord server, link below in the description if you haven't joined. Obviously, we have a great community here, and we would love for you guys to, to join our community. But guys, that is it for the Formula 1 season. Of course, we've got plenty more content coming up, and until that video on Friday, and until my stream this Sunday at 12 PM UK time, it has been me, ChazerHD. Goodbye.